the site of the Pretty White Stone Hotel. All right, we've got representatives here from the DHS and Acacia. So we're going to have them, they got a little presentation. We're going to open up to questions. I have a series of questions from myself as the chair. We're going to go around after my questions are done. We will go to the committee, if anyone on the committee has any questions, and then we're going to open up to the public. There are a couple of speakers who've already said that they want to have statements to make. Steve Kaufman, representative from Councilman Vaca, and a representative from State Senator Klein. And we also have representatives from Ferry Point Community, which I want to make sure they have an opportunity to speak, and then we'll open up to the public. Our president staff is here as well. If they want to have anything to say, they can step forward. Okay, so representative from San Benedetto. So we got a full house, full support on this. So without further ado, I'd like to open it up to LaTanya Burnwell from. Okay. We have someone from the mayor's office as well. Hope we're going to see you.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to LaTanya Burnwell, who's DHS Director of Community Relations, to go over this presentation.
All right.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My colleague, Lisa Black, handed out some handouts, and I'd like to go through these with you. But as we begin to talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, I would ask you to kind of set the mood of understanding that we're talking about families with children. And these are families with small children. And the data that we'll talk about and some of the questions and concerns that you have, it's because that we're talking about families that are experiencing a situation that many of us really don't want to have that impact in our lives. So as we go through this PowerPoint presentation, I'd like you to always keep in mind that what we're talking about is a family, and a family experiencing the worst time in their life. The first slide I actually want to draw your attention to, coupled with this paper. Does everyone have this one? No? No? Don't worry. I'll tell you what's on it. The actual mood of what this paper impacts is the crisis that we're in. We are experiencing a crisis within the city. Today, we hit 56,000 individuals experiencing homeless. And why I say experiencing, because this is a state of them having no place to live. It's not who they are, this is what they're experiencing. Why is it a crisis? Because 56,000 people are in our system, and we can't get them out at the rate fast enough as more are coming in. That number is very sensitive for me, because I've been at DHS for a very short time, and I've watched that number rise. And it's rising because there are more people coming into the system. And why is it a crisis? Because all of us are feeling it. It's not just one community. It's not just one neighborhood. It's not just one group. It's each one of us. So as we start talking about these families, think about that number and what it means. On the back of that page, these numbers are basically symbolizing what's happening in your borough. These are the entrants that came into us through PATH. PATH is our intake center. That means that these are families coming in with their children because they have no place to stay. And they're coming in. This is who came to us in this fiscal year. These numbers represent why we have to site shelters at the rate that we're citing. I'm sorry if you don't have a copy, but I can pass this around for anybody who doesn't have it. Another thing I'd like you to draw your attention to on this slide, you see the children, these beautiful children. We're talking about people who you see every day. These are babies. These are faces that you see on the bus who don't have a place to go. So the numbers are attached to this new image of homeless. I would like to direct your attention. You see slide number 5. The top reasons why families are homeless. The number one reason today, this month, was domestic violence. Meaning someone is experiencing a situation that they have no control of, and they have to leave immediately to save the lives of themselves and their children. On the other side of that slide, despite the employment history, despite 27% of these families working, they are still impacted by homelessness. And we could spend all night talking about why they're working full-time and can't afford to have independent living. But think about those two data points. You have the top reason why a woman and her children are leaving their home because they're facing or surviving domestic violence. And then you have the top reason that 27% are working and can't afford to live independently. Another thing I would like to draw your attention to. If you see on slide 7, it will be on page 3. If you see that big chunk, the families that we're talking about at this facility, they came from the Bronx. We're not talking about bringing in families from somewhere else. These families came from the Bronx. 22 of those families came from the Bronx. So, anybody?
22 of 95?
Of 54. Some of the questions that you pose of why would we choose that facility? What are we doing to transform it so families with children can live there? If you look on slide 8, we're taking something that was not an ideal situation and we're committed to improving it so that families can live there. We're going to do extensive cleaning. We're going to make sure we bring in new furniture and supplies to make sure that those families can be safe while they're living there. This is a process that not only starts with when we go to the shelter, but how do we continue this discussion? One of the other things that I wanted to draw your attention to, slide number 12 on page 4. This is a process that's very dear to me. It's the community engagement process. Our community advisory boards are how we continue the conversation about what those families need and what you need in your community to integrate them fully. The community advisory board is made up of basically all of us here tonight. Us at DHS, us at the providers, elected officials. We commit to forming a community advisory board that represents the community and the shelter, and how do we start having collaborative conversations about what we need to do better and what you need from us to make us good neighbors. This is a process that we don't stop with. We continue to have CAB schedules, we continue to meet with you, we have action steps, we have follow-ups, we have commitments. The thing about it is that we know that this is a difficult thing to accept, but we're willing to commit to the process to working through it. And as we ask questions tonight, keep in mind, anything that's not answered and resolved tonight, we're committing to working through that with the CABs. We're committed to actually setting targets. We're committed to actually coming up with action steps to improve it. So when you start to guide the discussions, remember, we're not just here and then leaving, we're actually here and staying here. Okay? One other thing I want to draw your attention to on page 5. It'll be this slide. I'll describe it for you for those of you who don't have a copy of the handout. It's showing the spectrum of how do we start having more collaborative communication with all of you. We start out, yes, by notifying you, but as we move to beyond the notification, we're moving towards how do we talk together. And this spectrum is showing that we're trying to empower you. We're not here to impose anything on you. If anything, we're here to try to bring your neighbors, your new neighbors into your community and empowering each of you to hold us accountable of how we integrate them into your community. As we start to have these discussions, again, I want you to think more long term. What are we going to commit to tonight and what do we need to follow up on while this facility is here? And finally, I want to draw your attention to some of the things that we are doing in long-term care. On page 6, I'll read it for you because I see a lot of people don't have a copy. The slide that's number 17, the 4-point plan, DHS is thinking about long-term of how we can start building capacity. How do we make sure that our families are starting to get permanent housing? Our commissioner is committed to making this 4-point plan work. The key thing is prevention. You've probably seen in different areas our home-based poster boards. We're trying to keep families within their public housing, within their housing. We're also thinking about how do we support them in transitioning if they're kind of having problems. So when you think about some of the discussions tonight, think about it that we have to have short-term fixes, but also long-term planning. And it takes time, but we need your help because the entire city is having a crisis of 56,000 individuals who are experiencing homelessness. I want to thank you for allowing me to go through this presentation. It wasn't ideal, but I appreciate it, and I'm here for any questions.
Questions will be at the end.
My name is Raul Russi. I'm the CEO of Acacia Network, and we have been selected by DHS as a provider of services at the site. I can go over some of the.
Can you turn around, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Raul Russi. I'm the CEO of Acacia Network, and we have been selected by DHS as the provider of services on site. As some of you know, we are an experienced operator. We've been doing this for 12 years. We presently operate St. Peter's, which is located in Community Board 10, and been doing that for 5 years. The actual site has 2 floors. There are 95 residential units, 44 units on the first floor, and 51 units on the second floor. There's a common lobby area. There's a dining space that's being provided, and there are 2 common bathrooms for the staff on the first floor. 3 security guards 24/7 at the facility, and there are 23 security cameras throughout the building and outside. The building has the J1 system connected to the fire department. Service families in transition and permanent housing. Service includes case manager, advocacy, employment, housing, entitlements, recreation, and referrals to additional internal and external services. The Acacia Network has 8 primary health clinics for health care in case some community hospitals are not quickly available. We have the healthcare facilities that we can transport people to and provide all types of different healthcare services. We'll have a program director, administrative assistants, a director of social services, 4 case managers, 4 housing specialists, a recreation specialist, 3 kitchen helpers, and the director of operations. We have been in the community, like I said, with St. Peter's for over 5 years, and consider ourselves good neighbors. Have operated the site without a single incident. We have a great working relationship with the neighbors in the community, and feel ourselves proud to become good neighbors as we've been there for the entire time we've been there. As far as the crisis, we all know the crisis that we have. It's unfortunate that this is going on, but the need is there, and the services have to be provided. And I'm proud to be an organization that services people who are in crisis at the worst possible time. These are families, as we said before, families that could come from your neighbor, your friends, your neighborhood, sometimes your family. I want to tell 2 quick stories that I think are important to what happens when these centers open. I think it was 2 years ago, we were at a community board meeting such as this, presenting a similar scenario where we had a shelter that we were opening in Community Board 1. After a very lengthy meeting where we answered concerns, some of them, very, very tough concerns that the community had. I left 10 minutes when I left the facility. I got a call from one of the staff members at the community board who said, I need to talk to you. I have a little problem. I just had a family walk in with 2 children into my office, and I want to know what to do with them. And I called my director, Robert Gonzalez. He turned around. We were heading home, came back, picked up the family. We placed them into the system, got both the mom a job, took care of the children. She worked with us for a period of time, and eventually wound up moving on to her own apartment, and is now living back in the community. Most recently, at 116th Street, we were at a community board, Lisa, myself, and a few others, and we were having a community board meeting. As a matter of fact, one of the gentlemen who's standing here was parked down the street on Park Avenue. We left about 8:30 at night after the meeting. The next morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from the speaker, and then the Councilwoman Melissa Barcarino, and she said we had an explosion and we're in desperate need of space to house all the emergency team and some place to house the families that we had. Immediately we opened the shelter that we had. We took 7, I think, of the families immediately, and the space that in fact was the shelter became the emergency response team for approximately 2 months. And the family stayed, some of the families stayed for us as long as 6 months. The reality is that crisis can happen anywhere, that we usually come in as good neighbors, but we are handling a very, very difficult situation, and these people are our neighbors that need our help. Thank you.
Just so everyone's aware who is here, I'll introduce the people from DHS and Katya. I'll get it right for the other. Camille Rivera, DHS Deputy Commissioner for Communications and External Affairs. Stand up and wave. Lisa Black, DHS Assistant Commissioner for Government and Community Relations. Elvin Garcia, Mayor's Community Affairs Unit, Bronx Director. Robert Gonzalez, Acacia Program Administrator. Fernando Brin, Acacia Community Consultant. Camille Rivera. Ron Abad, DHS Assistant Commissioner for Capacity Management. And I think that's everybody. Did I miss anybody?
Latonia, who did our presentation?
Tanya.
Name is Helen Rage Jacome, Chief of Staff for State Senator Ruiz.
Okay. You're now with DHS or Acacia?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's okay.
Just wanted to know.
It works closely enough with us.
All right. First of all, my first question from what we just heard is, Mr. Russo, you mentioned 95 units, and Ms. Burnwell mentioned 54 during the presentation. What is the plan for the amount of people you're putting here, the amount of families you're putting here, and what's the right head count? That's a big gap.
That's the capacity, the number of families in place.
So last night we had 54 families residing there. It is not fully occupied. We could go up to 95 families
So you'll continue to put families in there
as we need it.
as you need.
Mr. Chairman, there's a CO for 140, just wanted to inform you.
The other thing that we've heard, since no one came to the community beforehand, is that this was done in an emergency process. Your slide number 9 says, emergency declaration process, the process where a city agency is facing an emergency, seeks New York City Controller and Corporation Council approval to procure goods, services, or construction. DHS requests an emergency declaration to shelter families with children, adult families, single adults. And then your second slide, or your next slide, slide 10, says DHS enters a 6-month emergency contract for shelters occupied during emergency declaration. Are you telling us that this contract which you have right now at that facility is a 6-month only contract and the place?
So Ron can answer that question. Ron's
Good evening, folks. My name is Ron Abad, Assistant Commissioner of DHS, and I represent capacity. So the Controller's Office gives us, DHS, the authority to enter into emergency contracts for shelter. Shelter, as you know, is always emergency. Just as Mr. Rusi mentioned, DHS staff, shelter is always a temporary emergency situation for our families. And we never want to be in a situation where we have to build more shelters or have more shelters. No one intends really to have more shelters. It's not good planning, it's not good housing. The reality is we have many families that are struggling, many individuals that are struggling. We, the city, have a legal and moral obligation to make sure that we shelter on every night, each and every family that comes to our homes. That is our legal and moral obligation. In fact, we're probably one of the only, if not the only jurisdiction in the entire United States that has that carries that both legal and moral obligation, so we take it very seriously. Under an emergency deck situation, it gives us the authority to expedite contracting and to develop shelters, on an emergency basis. Right now, as you may know, homelessness is rising, and we're operating in a shelter system that has less than 1% vacancy. If any of you know the housing market out there, to operate a shelter system with is less than 1% capacity, meaning available units to shelter all our families. And you know, we're constantly trying to work to make sure that not one family, whether fall, winter, spring, or summer, is ever living on the street. New York in last few decades has done wonderful work to make sure that we have not one family living in the streets. That is our responsibility, and we take it seriously. So we entered into an emergency contract for this site for capacity of 95 units, meaning that the ultimate capacity is for 95 units. As Ms. Black mentioned, the census, the number of families that we have in the shelter is 54. Yeah, so we have the capacity going. The intent is to do a short-term emergency contract for 6 months. The controller gives us the authority to enter into a contract from the date that we entered, 6 months later, into a contract period. Depending on our capacity and needs, we will explore whether there is a need to extend it. But at this stage, we're just developing this emergency contract.
Is there a contract yet?
No, we're exploring a contract. It gives us the authority to enter into the expectation that there will be a emergency contract.
So how are people living there without?
Because, like I mentioned, the controller gives us the authority to enter prior to a registered contract on an emergency basis. Typically, a typical situation is the contract takes months to sort of register. Since we're going through a crisis, we cannot wait months to open it.
What was the start date of this?
We were in.
Last Monday, the
Last
15th.
Monday,
15th, effective the 15th.
September 15th.
Correct.
So by September 15th, you had done all this extensive cleaning, furniture and linens, kitchen installation plan, all that work has been done.
Well, let's just, I mean, there's too many questions coming out.
Okay, just my questions count right now. So
let's
my
just
question
look at this.
is, by September 15th, was this transformation outlined on slide 8, extensive cleaning, new furniture and linens, kitchen installation plan, has that been done?
by the date of the opening of the shelter, we have an inspection process that makes sure that the shelter is at least basically habitable, that it is clean, that there is linen, that is properly furnished as per our instructions. Now, there are plans to develop, ultimate plans to develop a kitchen plan or to enhance the security, all that works over time, but the basic requirement that we're required to do on a day-to-day basis, we comply by those.
How can they live there without a kitchen?
So so
Baby.
that stuff hasn't been done,
Oh, it has been.
No, it has been done.
okay.
The only thing that hasn't been done is the kitchen renovation
Kitchen
that is
renovation.
being planned.
But we're delivering food, bringing food on site, so all the family did.
Okay. And from the security standpoint, you talked about 3 security guards, 23 cameras, are those the cameras set up and installed?
That's all set up.
Addendum in your Department of Home Services guidelines requires that community board or elected officials receive prior notice with respect to the siting of a shelter and the contractor. We had gotten notice that the individual contractor was Help USA. Then we got notice, we sent a fax on a Friday evening after business hours, indicated it was Help USA. The following Monday, we got a FedEx letter, paper letter, saying that the contract was Help USA. At 4 o'clock that Monday, it was no longer Help USA, and we had no documentation or no notice of that. And we happened to go down, the chairman and myself, just happened to take a drive by the place, and we met up with Acacia when we go, and there was no indication that to us, formal indication that Acacia was indeed the contractor. We have yet to receive a formal letter, written formal letter, and just to finish. We have yet to receive a formal written letter in print form indicating that Acacia was the contractor. We do have a faxed letter that was sent to us indicating that it was Acacia.
I'm sorry, I thought you were saying that you never gave you a letter, and I
No,
remember.
but it was, we have not gotten the formal written
You
letter,
need a snail mail, a hard copy.
a hard copy, which we view as being formal legal notification.
Okay, so let's I think that we talked a little bit, but you have a long question. So I'm gonna have Ron talk about the difference. I think there is some confusion between the emergency declaration contract and what a citizen's authority is. Why don't you go through that, and then also go through practice around the past years.
I think Mr. Kearns raised this on Monday. On Monday, BDHS met with the Bronxborough Consultation, which are the head chairs of the various community boards throughout the entire Bronx. Mr. Kearns raised the same question, and I think he adequately answered that day, and we'll answer it right now. Addendums, you asked questions, I answered. Addendum 10 is a particular addendum. It's just a piece of paper that is attached to a form we call the open-ended argument, which gives the authority to any not-for-profit agency to go and submit a proposal to open a shelter. It is open-ended. Any community member, any of you, can come to DHS and get a copy of the open-ended argument. It's a public document. On that public document is something called Addendum 10, which outlines how we, DHS, are responsible, and the provider are responsible for notifying the community. That is under a typical open-ended RFP process. And that is done all the time throughout the city, to all various not-for-profits, various providers for all shelter. We're in a different situation. As I mentioned, we're in an emergency state. We have an emergency declaration, which gives us an additional authority to open shelter on a much quicker basis. But with the ultimate goal to have public notification, to have a registered contract which is open up to the public. Nothing is done which is not open to the public. But it gives us a different notification process than is what Mr. Kearns was mentioning as far as Addendum 10. So it's just a different instrument, but ultimately we notify. So from my understanding, right, Lisa, we did notify Mr. Kearns through, I believe, fax or email.
Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about the 7-day process. So, sorry. No wonder everybody's seeing. So in terms of the actual process of an open, Ron talked a little bit about that. We at DHS, because we understand that this is sometimes a shock to communities. People are sometimes fearful, they don't understand what's really happening, what's going on, you're opening up this shelter, who are these people? We get all that, and we understand that. But because we're in an emergency crisis, it's sometimes hard to project. And because, as Ron said, we actually go day by day, figuring out how many beds we're going to have for our families with children. That's how bad the crisis is. Ron and his team sends out a number every single day that shows us that we have 10 beds across the entire system. And we have a system of 56,000, which is as much as the city. So we instituted, the commissioner instituted a 7-day process, a 7-day community process. We instituted it. It wasn't by law. We're not governed by that process. In an emergency declaration, like, we can go in, open up a shelter, but that's not what we're doing. And in a new administration, when we have a vision of transparency and the opportunity to talk with the community, even when you don't agree with us, we're going to move forward and notify you as much as we can, when we can. So we instituted a 7-day process. And what that 7-day process is, and I sent it to all the community boards, and the commissioner sent it, you can resend it to the group. There's a number of steps. And the first step is a call or a phone call to let people know immediately.
Anybody have a Lincoln double parked outside? 1 minute, sir. Coming out.
So we have a 7-day process, and in that 7-day process, we say we will give you at least 7 days. At least 7 days notification during emergency declaration, during our emergency crisis. We will call you, we will call all elected officials, or we will email and follow up with a phone call the first day to everybody. We will then follow up with a letter. We will email that letter, we will fax our letter, and we will mail that letter. We will then ask if you want us to present at a community board meeting or have a town hall meeting such as this one. We will then connect you with the provider and give you all the pertinent information as to the demographics and the makeup of the shelter. We will then organize a community advisory board, and that all happens through a 7-day process. And then we will institute what Tonya talked about, which is a community advisory board, which is an appointee of every single community instituted in the area, so that we can address any serious concerns. We will let you know, and the idea the provider sits at that table to answer any questions and deal with the issues. We will also address the concerns. So, for example, there were a couple of concerns that people had within the community around the hotel itself. We think about that. So for example, transportation is a real issue, right, for our families in that site. It actually is, there is a concern there. We're instituting a transportation plan for our families with children because we have families with children that are going to need to get their kids to school or get their kids to daycare. So we're working with the DOE, or we're going to be working with the DOE to have that plan in place. So that's the 7-day process. And when we decided that, and you can correct me, Ron, when Help USA was no longer going to be the provider, we immediately followed up with a letter to the community board. It was not mailed. We can mail it to you so that you can have it. It was emailed, and we also followed up with a phone call, and we had extensive conversations. Whatever the situation may be, we chose a hospital, and they're just as good as Help USA, and we feel that they will benefit our families just as much. And so, in terms of that process, we instituted that process because at the end of the day, we have an obligation to the community. And, the deputy mayor in the city of New York has the message right. We are coming from a place of transparency. That doesn't mean that every time you're going to agree. But the previous administration, before that, were putting cluster sites all across the city in the dead of night and opening up sites and not including you in that process. We're going to conclude you in that process, and sometimes that might sometimes
After the fact.
So, and just respond. Your system worked in the sense that we did get full notification about Help USA. I submit that it didn't work with respect to getting notice about a hospital. It came in very late. It came in well after we received a notice from Help USA. It came in after we got notice from Help USA that they weren't going to travel. So, in that sense, the notification worked correctly from our perspective. And I do respect everything you said because that's how the system does work, and I do understand it to be that way. I also have another question with reference to the documents you did submit to the controller's office regarding the operation of the facility. You said that at one point that if the facility is serving women and children or pregnant women, that there would be kitchen facilities on site. There are no kitchen facilities on site, none whatsoever. So does that mean you're going to build kitchen facilities? Does that mean you're going to serve meals in congregate? What does that mean?
Sure, I actually just toured the site before I got here because I wanted to make sure that I had seen what Ken had saw last week when you went to visit. There is the old restaurant and coffee shop that was on site. There is a warming kitchen in there installed where there is an oven where they will literally warm up all of the meals 3 times a day for every family that's there. In the interim, the families are getting served 3 meals a day while they're there. The owner is interested in revamping that kitchen to make it a fully functional kitchen. So that's part of the stage that we're planning on completing right now, and we're working with the provider, and the provider's working with the owner to do so.
So, I'm going to turn over the rest of the committee in a minute. I still don't understand this emergency timing issue of 6 months. You have taken over this site under an emergency condition. The emergency is a 6-month short-term contract, which takes us out to February. This community has been very supportive in the past. We took on people from Sandy for 9 months. 120, 130 people who were displaced out of Coney Island. We've been more than happy to do our part when called upon, but I just don't understand. First of all, we don't understand the rationale behind putting this location, putting a homeless shelter at this location. And there's a big difference between an emergency and a 6-month period and a permanent shelter. It seems to be doing a lot of planned renovations for an emergency location. What is the long-term plan?
From our perspective, we have 6 months, as Ron said, we have 6 months agreement. In the meantime, while we're there, we have to abide by the regulations that the city has to kind of meet. So we have to prepare the site to be able to meet whatever the requirements of the city are.
So who's paying for all that? You're paying that out of pocket?
No, we're not paying it out of pocket. We have a contract with the city to provide the services, and whatever renovation renovations, the work is done, is either done through the lease agreement with the landlord, and that's his responsibility of the lease, and those things that fall under the provider's agreement will be paid by the provider. Ultimately, I heard the city say that it will determine what the needs of the future are, and that determination is only around the city. The city will determine, at whatever point they determine whether they're going to continue to run the site as a family shelter, or whether they're not. Our contract will be for 6 months.
I'm going to turn it over to the committee for any
Can I
questions.
ask?
Yeah, of course.
You're saying 6 months. When you speak about the place, beyond that 6 months, you're still gonna use this as a shelter.
What we're saying is the contract gives us the authority to put 6 months. Right?
No, I want you to answer my question in terms of what I asked you, regardless of the contract and those contract issues, because this issue is not anything against the home. We're not speaking about that. The issue for this particular location, and maybe it's good that we're getting these kind of conversations done, and not just for our board, but for all the boards in the Bronx and all over the city. But this particular location has potential to provide revenue, untold amounts of revenue, for this town, for this city. Revenue that would actually go to working towards the client base that you're speaking. It's much needed revenue. It is a long-term plan. We had golf course coming up. Okay, nobody knew the place was going to become available. But once it became available, we were looking at it as the next phase to that development plan to bring in revenue. Now, homeowners, in the current situation, when that revenue fails and you're providing for your clients, the city now has to come back to these homeowners and say, I got to raise your taxes because we need money to cover those shortfalls. The city needs to look at where it can find finances for those shortfalls. And when you have a place where you have an opportunity, then you got to take that opportunity. Now, you come to us and you say, look, we need this for this emergency right now. We would like to use it to handle our current situation, but as the future comes, we'd like to clear this out and let it go towards that future development. We wouldn't have a problem with it. We have nothing against the homeless here. In fact, in regard to that, we have many people in our board that may be close to homeless. Okay, which is another conversation we need to have with you at another time regarding services in our community. But in looking at this situation, we're just looking at it in terms of the most pragmatic sense, in terms of revenue of this city. Okay, we don't have many sites in our board that would be conducive to such, and we understand that. We also don't have many sites in our board that can provide future revenue such as that may provide. And we think it's responsibility of the city to look at that as well. We've been taking care of that emergency need. But that emergency need has lasted as long as I've had children on this earth. Okay, and my oldest is going to be 40. So that need is there and it continues, and we understand that. And we like to participate in that. But at the same time, we got to have positive conversation that takes in the future for all of us. This board, the people I represent, they'd stand up in a minute, okay, to defend and to assist. That's one of the beautiful things about this board. I'm so proud to live in. But now at this point, we feel we're being trampled. We feel we're not being talked to. Your notification says, notification, we're doing it, that's it. Boom. That's not fair to us as citizens. It's just not fair. And we need to have a better conversation about this, a more rational conversation, and a more, for us, board-specific conversation.
Thank God.
Again, speaking for my board.
I think you hit it on the head. The city does not, what you said was probably clearly understood. I think we will continue to have an open conversation with you and the rest of the board and the community in the coming months. Clearly understand the balance of revenue, home ownership, community interest versus homelessness and shelter. You know, it's not a versus situation. We know that it is a struggle. It is not difficult. We don't want to come in the sense that you mentioned trampling. That's definitely not the intent. We think we've made our basic requirement to notify the community, but definitely we are open to continue to have conversations in the coming weeks, in the coming months. It is not clear, and, it's not firm set. This is a long-term goal that we make sure that we will have that conversation.
Chairman Russo, Mr. Kaufman, who fought the case down on St. Peter's, would like to add something to this.
Okay, we're gonna let the committee members who are here speak. After the committee members who are here speak, I will have people.
It would lose its importance to the emergency issue
I
since
doubt
he
it will.
led a case against it.
I doubt it will.
Thank you, Mr. Russo.
Okay. Is it possible that you can do this emergency contracts with all the motels in the Bronx, especially in the Northeast Bronx, that are doing the nasty things, and displace them and put in the emergencies? At least one or two.
So we have a legal and moral obligation to shelter, and I just want to say that,
Again.
I know that there is,
Because we didn't hear it 35
oh,
times.
homeless people, they have, no jobs, and there are good people and bad people everywhere, but I'm gonna have to push back on you respectfully and say that, people don't come to shelter because they've got nothing else better to do. That is their absolute last place to go. And if you have ever seen our PATH Center, and I would encourage you one day to stop by, these are people who are carrying their luggage and their babies and walking into PATH asking for shelter. And so we don't consider them bad people or unscrupulous people. And so what I'm saying is, I understand, but we do need to clarify that, just for fairness. So there's no kind of like, we're going to take the good people and we're going to put them here, and then we're going to take the bad people and we're going to put them I can't hear you.
Facilities that exist. There's so many motels up in the Northeast Bronx, okay? And use some of those.
So
your emergency.
So our
Talk to the owners, just like you spoke to the owners of the Capri. Speak to them.
So we have
let them make space for you.
So basically we are spreading the net wide. Everybody has a moral obligation. This is a city issue that has to kind of be shouldered by all. We're going everywhere. This is not a situation where we're trying to. We understand that the Bronx has a high level. We get it. I get it. I'm from here. Actually, I'm born a couple blocks away. We get it, but we are spreading our net wide. But Ron is at capacity, and every single day he is begging people to, begging providers to bring them properties that can be used for shelter. And so we have. And do you want to talk a little bit about the process about why it's so hard?
Sure. I understand what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying, but just another way of looking at it. No matter, even if we would be at a community board meeting in the North Bronx, folks the same. You know what I'm saying? Same folks, homeowners, just saying same, and they would ask us these questions, and they would say, why don't you plant a hotel or motel in that area, It's never perfect. We acknowledge it. There's no perfect shelter, perfect housing setting. So I understand what I
Maybe the community would be happy to get rid of what goes on in those motels at the present time and have homeless people. I'm just giving you an idea you're in emergency mode, so let's look at the big picture.
If anybody knows of any type, we'd be more than willing to consider them.
Anything.
Bob?
Come on. Excuse me. You talk about the moral and legal obligation, and I agree with you 100%. We have a moral and legal obligation. Everybody has to do their fair share. Well, when did the Bronx's fair share become 35% of the homeless population in a city with 5 boroughs? We already have 35% of the population. Why do we have 20% of the population in 5 boroughs? This is the part I find very difficult to understand. The borough president's office has often had the expression, don't dump on the Bronx, but it keeps coming back to the Bronx. Now, you tell us that 35% come into the shelter from the Bronx. But you know what? We have people from all 5 boroughs who are being sheltered in the Bronx. 35% is not our fair share. There are 5 boroughs, our fair share is 20%, yet you keep opening up shelters in the Bronx. I don't care if it's the North Bronx or South Bronx. Community Board 10, you have 69 entrants in this district. We have how many hundreds of members in this district, in the shelters. We're not getting our fair share. We're getting abused. It's gotten to the point where you said, you know what? We can get away with this in Bronx. Let's put it in the Bronx. Staten Island has a fifth of the shelters that the Bronx has. Queens has half. Brooklyn has half. Manhattan has about a third of what we have. There's something drastically wrong with this picture. You're right. The entire city has a legal and moral obligation. Stop dumping it in the Bronx. Put that share at 20%. We're one out of 5 boroughs. So let's see if we can start making that change. Let's start today.
Yeah!
Yeah! 17% of the population of New York City. 17% of the population of New York City.
Mr. Boss, real quick.
Yeah.
We had a community board meeting Thursday evening. One of my colleagues, unfortunately, is not here tonight, made a comment regarding all this at the meeting. DHS is in an emergency situation. I've heard everybody speak, and I respect it wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, from what we've heard, is that DHS has pulled out 9 different housing shelters in the Bronx already. So if we're in that dire need of emergency situations, why is DHS pulling out of those shelters that are currently occupied?
Cluster sites?
Oh.
Well, want me to answer the issue of clusters? I will do my best. So during the Bloomberg administration, in the previous administration, there was a need for capacity in their minds, and instead of building, and we should tell you that the commissioner and the administration's vision is to build facilities that are viable for families with children. Many of our families with children have serious crisis, are going through serious crisis. Eviction, some women have mental illness, DV, domestic violence, 27%, as Latonia talked about. And so they were putting people in what's called cluster sites or scatter sites. I think there were 3,000 scatter sites. Those were owned by, needless to say, not the most scrupulous landlords that were being opened up all across the Bronx and in the city of New York with no service provider. We would just basically take the family, put them there, and deal with it as they come. The commissioner, when the commissioner was appointed, his first position was to not only renegotiate the rates for many of those scatter site apartments. These scatter site apartments were costing the city millions of dollars, okay? And they were actually creating instability in the market. So, for example, I live in an apartment on 161st Street, paying market rate, right? What I would think is market rate. And right next door, there was a homeless family, and charging the city $3,000, sometimes $4,000 a month in rent.
And do you think
in the Bronx? So let me finish. So that was kind of what was going on. The commissioner, the first deputy, along with the capacity team and along with the administration, headed by the deputy mayor, Lilian Barrios Paoli, basically said no more. We're going to request, and we're not only going to request, we're going to demand that and cut the rate for all those landlords to a rate that is suitable and market rate, so we no longer destabilize the housing market. We're also going to be more transparent, and we're going to have to get away from bad providers and unscrupulous landlords who are taking advantage of our families. It was no longer and is no longer viable and a model that works for our families. We're going to be putting them in spaces that gives them social services, that gives them an opportunity to work with their child on, getting them to the right schools, that has transportation, all these different things we want in a facility, and that's where we're moving towards. We're also moving towards a longer approach of actually having, and this is a long term, but we're looking at it in different spaces, but creating opportunities of entrance within your community. So if I'm from the South Bronx, and I have to go into shelter, and I've gone into home base, and I've gone through all those levels, right? I'm going to go into home base and into a space, and I'm going to say, I'm homeless, but I don't want to go to Queens. I don't want to go to Manhattan. I want to stay in my community because, I have support here. my kids go to school here. So we're working on those steps in order to try to change that dynamic, and it's going to take a long time. And you know, we've been doing this for 8 months. I've been here for 8 weeks, and we're doing our best. But just to answer your question, some of these sites we have to close because they're actually not safe for our families. So, for example, there were 4 sites in State Senator Diaz's neck of the woods. One of them was with 941 Intervale. We were told by the senator that that site was unsafe. That was a scatter site apartment. There's nobody else in that site. We have emptied that building because it's not viable, it has no social services, and it's not conducive for our families. And that's why, but those are 4 sites.
But on that fair market value, I understand, I respect that. The fair market value, the site you're going into now at Hudson River Parkway, they charge by the hour. That rate's gotta be absorbed.
No,
That's not true.
That's not true, yeah.
What's the rate? Yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't know what the rate was.
And we're trying to save money, which is great. I agree with that.
We have a structured budget, a very reasonable budget based on a bunch of services, which we mentioned outlined earlier. So all the social sector,
What's the rate?
in a second.
Okay, are you confused because it's kind of hard for us to follow?
So it includes social services, which basically, we're required that for every 25 families that we at least one is a social services staff. There's a director. There's folks that are working on employment, trying to get working with their children in foster care or at risk of ACS. There's all the social services packages. And there's all the security, like you mentioned, the security staff. Very contrary to any apartment building or any other motel or hotel, we're required to provide 24/7 security. So there's security. Then there's meals. Just like the gentleman asked about kitchen issues and stuff like that. We're required to provide 3 meals to these families. Many families come into some we're not even getting 1 meal on a daily basis. Now in a shelter required to provide food. Of course, maintenance. We have to have maintenance to make sure that it's maintained. Sure.
How much are you paying the concierge?
Oh, we actually pay them if they're deemed as reasonable. It's about a 120 rate, which is all inclusive of everything that I mentioned.
120.
You're gonna ask me a question. I'm gonna answer.
Yes, 120 a day. 120 a day per family or per person?
I'm gonna answer the question. It is per family. There's a $120 inclusive rate that includes services. It includes maintenance, security, rent, utilities. It's a pretty comprehensive.
My issue I have is the property owners that are now are probably not making that, so it's conductive to them.
They're not getting rate. We're paying, remember, we pay the provider for a host of services. That's contrary to the motel situation where someone perhaps was getting an hourly rate for an hour with no services and not a family, right? So, I mean, that's that.
What is it?
We took the, no, so you can understand, because you can't compare apples to oranges, right? So you're taking a situation where there's a motel which is used on a per use basis, right, for a short-term stay, versus the same space that we're now with families and then with children, that we have to provide everything that we have to provide, plus the host of services, with the ultimate goal. This is the difference, with the ultimate goal of stabilizing that family, moving them out of shelter, right? Working with the family, trying to get permanent housing for the family, trying to stabilize the children, right? Trying to stabilize that family, get the kids back from foster care, whatever the situation there. Provide services for the mom who may be struggling with substance use or mental health, right? Do all that while trying to work with her in the transportation issue with their kids, get their kids going back to school on a regular basis, because one of the issues with homeless children is that high attendance rate, a lack of attendance rate at schools. Stabilize the children, get them back, then find permanent housing, which we know all New Yorkers are struggling with. Try to find them and get them back into the community. That is what we're
saying. A couple of things on top of that.
Wait,
hold on. Question about the rate.
I got it. I got it. The rate is
Don't do the math because the math is not going to work.
Okay, the rate is 120 per day per family. How much are you paying? How much are you paying the landlord?
We don't pay the landlord.
Who pays the landlord?
I'm gonna explain it like this and not go into too much of the math.
Just keep it simple. I don't need to make it simple.
We pay that rate that I just said, and which is a public rate that we pay per contract. and it hosts all those services I just listed. And out of all those services, there's just a rent term there, right? A rent term there, which actually is a rent term per family per day, which I'm going to tell you is less than the hourly rate of a hotel or motel, whatever.
We just told you what the number is.
So then that 120, it pays for the rent and the services.
Everything,
And
everything.
food and
So he's paying the
Services.
landlord.
Yeah.
And roughly about $4 million.
I know, I can do it, I can do
So
that.
I would suggest
okay.
that we be
Thank you.
careful about the math because the math is not as simple as
Michael, hold on a
everybody
second.
thinks.
Martin, go ahead.
I just want to return back to what I had asked before, and I guess I didn't get any kind of relevant answer, okay, in terms of the use of these particular sites.
I didn't. I said to you, you asked me, you asked the issue of revenue,
I'm asking
right,
how
you-
open-ended.
and I just answered, I answered before I'm gonna answer again. You mentioned about revenue, you didn't mention to us what was the revenue, but you mentioned about revenue versus the intent of how long. The most we said that we understand the long-term issue of you not wanting it to be a permanent place because it counters your revenue and interest, right? Is that what you said? So we said the most that we can do at this stage, because we will have a homeless problem months down the road, and we will have to evaluate things, and you opened it up, but we can come back to a conversation, that in the coming weeks, I said, in the coming weeks and coming months, we will continue to have this conversation, and we will explore where to go. It will be disingenuous for us right now to say we will not have it there for 6 months. It will be disingenuous on the other side, we will say we will. So the most we can do is just continue to have this conversation.
All right, Alex.
Michael,
Yeah, I'll try to be as short as I can.
please.
But you're always going to have, and I feel very strongly, and this board has done a great job in trying to try to do the best they can with the homeless problem. But you're always going to have an emergency basis. And even though your domestic violence figures is the flavor of this month or maybe this year, it didn't start with the Bloomberg administration. It started with the Giuliani administration. 2001, 2002, you had a 57% increase in homeless families.
We agree.
And you have a precedent here that you could follow. When HASA had, and I don't understand how the HIV and AIDS people have so much stronger lobby, especially now when they're living. But you have a precedent. You have local law, HIV 49, in where HASA not only got the 480, not only got the nutritional and transportation of 193 extra, all in the law, but then also got on top of that with case-by-case establishments of a studio apartment. You can have $897 a month. A one-bedroom, $998. This is for one person. For two people, a two-bedroom, $1,134. You got to get away from the $250 for two people, or $283 if you have a minor child. And maybe I've heard very good things about you, Commissioner. Commissioner Banks, I know he's going to be wonderful for the clients. I hope for the employees too. I don't have much faith in Miss Barrios, though. I remember her when she worked for Giuliani, and she was the HRA commissioner. But your commissioner I heard good things about, and Commissioner Banks. But if you don't do what HASA did, you're always going to have an emergency situation. And back in 2001 to 2005, the Bloomberg administration did a very good study with an institute, I can't remember the name. They actually followed 327 families, and they came up with all the figures. The number one reason for the 57% was loss of income, loss of public assistance. Domestic violence back then was number 5. So it's more than domestic violence, it's more than mental health. It is the rent levels that we are going to have to start paying, which is going to prevent people from being evicted. And maybe they won't have mental health and domestic violence and everything.
I just want to say you did a really,
Thank you, Joe.
You're right. The snapshot that LaTonya gave was the snapshot that we have at the family right now, just for clarification, that the families that are at the center right now. You're absolutely right. we have a lot of work to do. We have to gain, we have a subsidy program that we think will move close to 5,000 families out of shelter. We're working with NYCHA to move up our homeless families who are working into NYCHA slots. We are trying to figure out how we move our adults into kind of MRT programs and supportive housing.
What's an MRT program?
Medicaid redesign team, it's for seniors primarily and disabled in shelter.
We're also trying to figure out, there is a longer term, I absolutely agree with you. We have issues, Commissioner Banks is working very hard to, the issue on the PA cases, when they lose their PA cases, he's actually, gotten rid of a lot of the sanctions, which has allowed people to kind of keep on getting, it's amazing. He's got a really great vision, and it's not limited to the families. So that's one piece, but we have to do more. Right? We have to do more. There's other issues like wages, and there's other issues like evictions. I think 27 to 30% now are evictions. There's so much more. So we really need your help, right? This is not, we understand that we're always going to be in the capacity.
They're informal evictions too, and that's another problem.
But we do need your help, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Chris?
So I have just a concern. I know that we said that this is an emergency contract for 6 months, and it can be renewed, and that seems very open-ended. So I want to ask you a question. Do you have any examples of locations that have been opened up by DHS and have been returned to the community? I'm excluding the ones that were not.
The ones that just opened,
the ones just opened. We just the emergency deck is actually in place since May. It's just been a short term. It's been in place since May, so we haven't closed any of them because we're still in the emergency.
So what I'm asking, I don't know if I understand. So you have examples of locations that were opened and after, for emergency purposes, and within 6 months, they were returned back to the community?
No. We have situations just like you mentioned. We have sites that we've closed. Deputy Commissioner for quality reasons and stuff like that. But for the emergency.
Right. So I'm saying there is actually no precedent of a location that DHS has opened, shelter for homeless, that has been returned back to the.
So let me clarify. Temporary housing, emergency temporary housing is emergency temporary housing. So emergency, when a family needs it, it's under emergency. When we use emergency temporary housing, that's kind of what it is. But your question is, have we ever closed an actual facility? We
Once the emergency is gone, once the need is gone, have you ever closed the site?
Hold on, let me just clarify.
That's it.
Wait, hold on. Your question is, have you ever closed an emergency shelter after you've opened it?
Returned it back to the community since this was temporary emergency.
6 months. Has that ever happened?
We can't, that's the point. I'm saying we can't, I don't recall.
Okay, the answer is no. Okay. There's no process. Anna?
For 6 months.
During your site set up like this, where there's no transportation, the schools are so far away. What other sites?
Schools are a mile away, not so far away. Might not be, we're working families that live a mile away.
No question.
What other sites do you have that mirror this?
What mirrors this? What do you mean?
What I mean is there's no transportation, the school is so far away, there's access for, even for the moms to get jobs.
It's not an ideal site. But it's
not an ideal
site. It's not an ideal site, but it's a site that is available to us. We are surrounding the site with transportation, with daycare opportunities.
What transportation, like you're going to get
We're going to shuttle, we're going to work with DOE to pick up the kids. We're, instituting a meeting, I think, soon with DOE.
DOE started today.
Yeah, we started today.
What's starting today?
People who live there don't get that benefit.
I'm sorry, I have to be able to answer the question.
Just because I was there this morning, I saw no
Okay,
shuttle.
so we are working we're working a whole kind of to surround the area with.
So you're going to make like little communities here?
Well, it is a community.
I know, but you're going to make like a community within a community.
We're making a community that's transitioning into your community, their community that's transitioning in.
Andy?
One other thing, Mr. Provider, the Community Advisory Board, I lived on St. Peter's Avenue for 50-something years, you're there 5 years. I was invited to 3 board meetings. Your members do not make it easy for the residents to attend any of your meetings. They don't work after Monday to Friday, after hours. Myself and Sandy Leslie tried to, we were invited to the meetings, but they will not make adjustments to their schedule to accommodate us that work. So don't skip,
May I answer that?
You have F for that.
Well,
So we can talk offline about how we actually address
No,
that
no,
for you.
the provider
We would
is
love
very
to.
important.
No, we're right, I think you're right, we should have a
but
conversation.
I do want to say something, and Robert, who's in charge of city council.
So we've been in touch with this community board, actually, we speak to Mr. Kearns quite often, and we have regularly old community advisory board meetings. As a matter of fact, we have one coming up on
I was invited to
on
three.
Wednesday.
Three, but we're the community works. We're not there Monday to Friday,
I've had one,
And you won't make your adjustments for
That's
the
not
people
true.
that live in the community.
We
Hey,
hold
I'll
them.
show you the
Okay,
emails.
okay, so can we, so let's, we're focused on Capri, that's an issue, and that's a viable issue, and so we need to address it, and we always usually have our cabs in the evening, so let's figure that out.
Andy?
Of the 54 people you're housing, do they have criminal backgrounds, and do they have drug problems?
We're not allowed to talk about our, we're not allowed to talk about our residents and families.
So then you're
So
not
you
being
won't answer
transparent,
that
you're
question.
speaking about
No,
mental.
we're not, our
have
clients
one
under
question.
social service
Address.
law are, we have to keep the confidentiality of our clients to keep them safe. And we're not going to divulge their information, to the public. That's just, it's a social service law. We are required and mandated by law to keep their identities confidential.
Change
I'm
the
not
law.
asking for their
Stop hiding
identity.
behind
I
it.
want to know if you're housing criminals or drug addicts in our community. Very
Some
important.
members have issues related to domestic violence, some members have issues related to mental illness, just like all communities. I'm sure there's drug
I'm
use.
So we need to
specifically
answer it.
saying, do you have people who have been arrested or waiting for court dates, or people who are on drugs?
We don't have that information.
We answered.
We answered the
We
question.
No, you didn't answer the question. So the answer
Answer it.
goes unanswered that you refuse.
No, here's your answer. There perhaps are families and individuals struggling with alcohol use and prior criminal history, like there are in every community, in every residence in New York City.
Okay, we don't accept that. Okay, they should not be brought into our community.
I think it's again pushing back to the idea that these are families that are struggling, and that just like in every community, there are families who are struggling, and we shouldn't be, I think, stereotyping them, that all of them are criminals or have criminal history.
My family's struggling too.
That's my question. If you have legitimate people they're going through a bad time, that's one thing. But if you're housing criminals that should be in jail, or people with drug problems, that's a separate issue. You should not be mixing those people.
We're not housing illegitimate people, we're housing all people legitimate.
Okay.
We're housing people who are struggling with issues, various issues, whether addiction, whether domestic violence, whether substance use, whether mental health, any issues, and we're attempting to use our resources to support all.
But yeah, you don't want to answer my question?
Okay, Joe.
Next.
Okay, Monique, go ahead. This is gonna be the last question from the committee, then we're gonna open it up to the public.
Would you let Mr. Covey, he's got the kid's birthday to go home.
I understand that. We all have kids' birthdays, we all have stuff to do.
Okay.
I'd like to go home and have my dinner too, Julie, all right? Let me run my committee. When
just
you
asked
have this,
Jill.
you can run your committee,
Oh,
okay?
absolutely.
Thank you. Monique, go ahead, please.
So you mentioned that you're also working with NYCHA.
Yes, ma'am.
So my question to you is, what services are put in place as after service?
Oh, that's a very good
Once
question.
they're placed into an apartment, are there services to help them with good housekeeping? Are there services that help them with paying their rent and you know, transitioning into the community? Are there services put in place for that? And the reason why I'm asking is because I live in NYCHA and I experienced some of the placements that were made firsthand. So once you answer my question, then I'm going to elaborate.
So as part of the delivery of services, it's the responsibility of the caseworker to work with the clients to save a portion of their money every month so they can put it into a deposited, so they can have the dollars necessary to begin their first payment of rent. We work with the families to stabilize their children, to make sure they're in school. We work with the families, taking them to apartment. Once they get we feel they're ready to go out looking for apartment. We provide transportation to take their families to look at apartments. We connect them with the landlords. We work with them to teach them how to take care of their apartments, how to clean their apartments, how to take care of their children. We work with some of the food pantries to help them with food. We work with all those different providers to help the family begin to organize their lives. Many of these families come to us because they lost control of their lives, and we work very diligently to try to get them back into a system where they begin to save, like we all do, begin to properly let their children probably take care of their apartment, structure their bill paying so they can begin to do the things necessary to get them back into the apartment.
With respect to NYCHA, we do offer, the City of New York does offer aftercare services through our home-based office. And I think that's what you're referring to. We do help them with household budgeting. We actually will visit the apartment on site to make sure that all of that is worked out. We did learn from our prior experience.
Once they're placed, how long is the aftercare? And the reason why I'm asking is because I have a young lady with 2 children who moved into my building as of May. This young lady is experiencing, she's depressed, and I think she suffers from anorexic, and she has 2 children.
So we can talk offline about that instance
Right, she
in
needs help.
particular. Yeah, every family is different, so we will visit them, based on their circumstances.
This is not a complaint.
No,
I'm
I'm
just
happy to look into
concerned
it.
that they get the help that they need.
And it actually would be interesting to know because we're doing wraparound aftercare services, and so please touch base with Lisa because if they're not getting those services, that's a serious problem.
Right, and as a result, you know what happened? They end up homeless again because this one individual is in the rears already with her rent.
Okay, I'm going to close out the committee. I want to open it up to the public. Limit to 3 minutes. I'm going to start with Mr. Kaufman. Then I'm going to have 2 representatives from Ferry Point, the community who's really directly affected by what's going on, and then we'll open it up to anyone else. Go, Mr. Kaufman.
Late in life, I had twin boys, and I don't want to be late to get home to their birthday, which is today, so I'm going to get shot. But I felt the sense I come down here, and if you believe what these people have to say, I got a bridge to sell you.
Yeah!
You know what they're doing. There are 3 elements. There's the homeless people who we all love and need help. Then there's the city, and then there's us. When you argue tonight, and when you take your battle to the street, don't let them put a picture of a homeless family in front of your face, because then you will lose. That's right. Remember, it's them that are shoving things down your throat without your consent. I want to read a paragraph by Judge Wright in his decision concerning Westchester Square. This was May 31st, 2013. It's not Stephen Kaufman, it's nobody else. Listen to this decision. The respondents, meaning the city, have offered in defense of their actions reasons why the city charter does not apply, offers no examples of when its requirements must be adhered to. To accept the respondent's view, no procedure is necessary before committing the city to long-term, potentially budget-destroying expenditures. In essence, the Department of Homeless Services has made itself a little like a CI black op. I'll repeat that. In essence, I didn't say it. The Department of Homeless Services has made itself a little like a CIA black op, spending unbudgeted funds without apparent restraint. I find the attempts at hair splitting by the respondents to be unpersuasive. To accept their arguments would be to vitiate, if not annul, the city charter. An emergency, there's no objective criteria. They'll sprinkle dust in the ground and it's emergency. That's what they've been doing since the consent decree 30 years ago. They sprinkle dust, somebody in the bathroom decides it's an emergency, and you got an emergency. There's no impact statement. Bob summarized it perfectly. We have 30% of homeless shelters. John Benizio's here. We fought in Westchester Square. They're all from the Bronx, half of them were Pennsylvania. We watched the license plate go in and out all day long. What services were given to these people? And what landlords are getting rich? I'm a capitalist. I wish I was very rich one day. But how much is Capri making on this unsavory deal? You know, if you're a landlord and you put your name on a homeless shelter, there's a number you call up, they'll immediately hire you to house homeless people. There's no ULURP proceeding. They don't have to come in front of you. If they may, they'll do it. If they don't want to, they won't do it. They had started out in Westchester Square with month-to-month contracts. Judge Wright found it not acceptable. Then they go to 6 months, and then they now 5 years. When this thing comes, good or bad, it's never going to end. You got it for the rest of your life. And to me, it's time. And I was a public official, I'm not running again, but it's time for people to come up and say, what does the community want? Because we are starting to take off. You got a beautiful golf course. They're good people. You got a nice mall. I'm a little bit against it because I don't want it to hurt the Throgsneck merchants of Tremont Avenue. We're starting to see articles that real estate is booming in the Bronx. This is not going to help us. We want to come back. And I have nothing against these people. They're wonderful people. They're trying to do the job. But the first thing this lady said is these poor homeless people. They're trying to tug at your heartstrings. Don't let them do it. Because as Judge Wright said, it's a CIA black op. At night and safe, and that's what you deal with. I've got to run. Thank you.
Clarence Darrow. Okay. Go ahead. By the way, just please announce who you are so we can get it down and then.
I'm Joanne Somers, President of the Third Floor Civic Association. This is exactly in our neighborhood. Now they're talking about caring for these homeless people. Did they even go into the building and check it out?
Exactly.
You have families, men, women, children. How old are the children?
Well, exactly what is the makeup?
I did the analysis. There are 83 children as of last night that are between the ages of 0 and 18. 41 of those children are school age.
And where are they going to school?
DOE was on site today.
So what was the outcome of that meeting?
DOE will remain on
Joanne's
site.
got the floor. When Joanne finishes, then everyone else can speak, all right?
Let me please say this.
I'm not going to say it all night.
This question of you, have you gone to see these rooms? I understand they're rooms. They're not apartments. They don't have kitchens. They have a bathroom and maybe one bed. How many people are occupying that one bed?
Why don't you ask the question instead of the room?
Yeah, you're correct. Rob, you would have
Actually, the board also did a site visit as well. So the rooms, they vary. Some rooms have one single full-size bed, and some rooms have double beds.
Okay, and how many do they accommodate? How many children, how many adults are in that room?
It depends.
The largest size family is 4 right now.
Yeah, that's correct. The average size sounds about 4 to 5.
This is not an apartment for them. You're saying
It's temporary housing.
Temporary. And once they move out, and how quickly do you move them out? And who do you put in their place?
So the average, unfortunately, the average length of stay for families with children is about 400 to 400 days. That's 400 days.
Longer than 6 months, ain't it?
I think you're confusing with the length of stay to the actual shelter, right, into the actual system. This is an average of people who can't get out of shelter because of whatever situation that they're going through at that moment. That's the average length of stay of what we have projected across the system, just to be clear. And so that all housing for shelter is temporary. They don't get a free pass. Nobody gets a free pass to live in shelter.
Temporary is 14 months.
It's the average length of stay that a family needs to be able to get back on their feet. Some people need
Some
that.
families stay a few days, some families stay many years. It varies. It's the average length.
And place new people in their place. Once they move out, correct.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You understand that our area is inundated with traffic. You understand that. Now you're going to add more traffic to our community. We have one lane in and out. We have traffic is horrendous. You realize that you're going to add school buses and shuttle buses to take these people in and out of our community in one lane of traffic. We have not yet fixed the problem we already have. with our community.
So we can have a conversation at the, like, we're writing down a lot of the various concerns. One of them was transportation. We didn't know that traffic was an issue. We should have a conversation with
Traffic is a
DOT
very
to actually address and
issue.
mitigate that concern.
I mean, what if you give me an ambulance, what happens then?
That's a very fair answer to
Also,
this question.
that's in a flood zone. In an emergency, how are you gonna get them out of there? They're right at the tip, right at the beginning of the flood zone. You say you care about these people. You're putting them in bug-infested, disgusting motel that some guy wants to make some money off of, and you're putting them in a flood zone. On top of that,
So we'll answer the question in terms of the space.
I don't think
the
that you,
space.
no,
But I
I
wanna
don't think
answer
you
the question.
actually, no, you actually went ahead and made a decision to put these homeless people there, and you haven't checked it out thoroughly.
So we have looked at the site.
We have actually, we've all been, I've been at the site, we've all been at the site.
They're already there.
Like
Too
all
late to inspect it now.
shelters that we operate, and the city operates, there is an emergency disaster plan. It's like we had one in Sandy.
You have all this planned out.
We have
You
all
can
it
tell
planned out.
us the people of Ferry Point, right?
We
The
will-
people of Ferry Point who pay taxes on their homes that they work darn hard to buy. Then you're gonna come up with a plan.
We have a plan for all our families to move them out, for any emergency, any time that it happens, whether it's flood, fire, whatever. It's our responsibility to put in place a plan, this living plan. Anybody else?
I would like to see that in writing, please, and guaranteed.
We will glad to share with you.
Ma'am, having these people, having these families and individuals, okay, is not going to lower we actually have studies that can prove to you that it's not going to lower the value of your home.
Bullshit.
Do you own a home? Respectfully, having homeless people who are going through something, and with all due respect to the assembly member, it is families with children. So we can't, we're not going to not say that.
I don't know what the statistics are
So,
for
ma'am,
other
if I may,
areas that, what kind of crime rate.
Let her answer.
If I may, I mean, no, just totally respectfully. These are families with children. There is no study out there that I have seen, and if you want, please show me, that lowers the property value of your home by having people who are in need. And we have this in Midtown. We have shelters in Midtown Manhattan, on 28th Street, in the richest districts of the city. In the Upper East Side, in the Upper West Side, in Greenwich Village, in Brooklyn, in Park Slope, in Prospect South, you name it, we have them.
Those are all communities that have,
You know what?
have been benefiting
Okay,
from
hold on.
recent economic
If I may,
The Bronx is fighting
if I may, that's exactly what, and so that basically, what we're trying to say is that we should not be fearful of this community that's coming in. We should not. I ask that you be patient as we go through it, as we work with you, because believe it or not, we are trying just as much as hard as you are to help these families.
Warren, good.
You know what? When you look at the demographics, and I don't think you did, if you look at the demographics for the Ferry Point community,
No.
Yes.
then what is it you know about Ferry
Well,
Point?
considering
How
that I
many,
live in Sound, yes.
how many families live in Ferry Point right now?
I don't know.
You didn't check. How many families in your community?
60
In the area you're going? 60 families.
Okay.
So now you add 95 homeless families to that. Let's do some census math. You just destabilized our community. You got more people in there now, and in that current situation, than the people that live there. So if
Can you get this to us in writing?
Russo, you got the Trump organization in the house.
Gilio, thank you. I know everybody who's in the house. I
All
have a
right,
system, okay?
it's important, this
Okay?
statement's important.
I understand the statement's important. It's not as important as anyone else's here. I appreciate the Trump organization being here. But let me run my meeting my way. When it's your meeting, you can run it your way, okay? Enough.
I'm only suggesting.
I don't need a suggestion from you.
Thank you so much.
Joanne, are you done? Dottie?
Yes, I have the Ferry Point Community Advocates and also the Friends of Ferry Point Park, so I'm very involved, of course, in that area. And my main concern seems to be, you covered a lot of points, but my main concern is that I befriended a family that lived next door to me for years. And they had a horrible time living in that neighborhood because of the transportation to schools. Their students eventually became truants because it was too expensive to get to the schools, and they came out of their food money. Also the laundromats, you have to take cabs to load up your laundry, go to a laundromat and do it. If they're gonna have these people there, they need a laundromat on site, they need food on site, they need some kind of transportation to school. But Bloomberg had cut the transportation MTA card to limit the amount of buses you could take or something, and they suffered from that. It came right out of their income. So what I'm saying, number one, that is a ridiculous place for a homeless shelter for the concerns of the homeless. They shouldn't be treated like that. They shouldn't be dumped next to a park with no playground, no water, no restroom, and a history of West Nile virus that's tested every year, and that eventually in Ferry Point Park in general, it tests positive almost every year for West Nile. And everybody that lives there knows we have a terrible mosquito situation. So you're bringing families with children to a place with no playground, no amenities, no laundromats, and you're sticking them in the boondocks, we used to call our neighborhood. They call it the sticks for years, but now we have Target. So a couple of the families have talked with me on their way to Target, and so far they were nice people. But what I'm trying to say is it's a bad place for them. We just don't feel it's safe for them to go up and down our blocks. We have H.O. Penn has a contract with the MTA buses and has huge Caterpillar things that are blocking the view on that turn. We have, along the Hutchinson River Parkway, we have people that spill out from their site and block the sidewalk, which means they have to go into the street with their strollers. It just doesn't make sense. And on top of all of that, we thought there was an investment that we were forced to make into the golf course, which was $234 million. And now we're happy about it, finally, after all the environmental problems and everything for years. And now we're finally happy that this golf course is coming and that it's going to be something, instead of just trucks full of dirt that we had to put up with, banging and climbing of trucks up and down our block, hundreds of thousands of them. And now we thought, okay, now it's finally done, it's going to be something nice. And all of a sudden, the entrance to this golf course has a homeless shelter. Now, there's nothing wrong necessarily. Yes, every population has good and bad. Homeless have good and bad. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the image that produces in your mind when you say homeless. A golf course needs a certain image. Malls that you're going shopping in need a certain image. An image of safety, an image of beauty, an image of a pleasant experience. You don't want to think, oh, that Target, that's near the homeless shelter. I have to park my car, I'm by myself. It's getting dark, maybe I'll just go to New Rochelle. You know, you don't need to have that kind of a, quote, image. Now, you might be able to talk to us right now and say, don't project that image, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But we're only this many people in this room. And the rest of the world, when they hear homeless shelter, they have a certain image, and you know that. So now you're projecting this image, almost like a bully, putting this image in our neighborhood that we've been working so hard to bring up in the Bronx. And you're projecting this image, you're dumping it right in our laps, and you're taking away all the work that we did, all the parks events that we tried to make it where it's beautiful, and we're trying to get Ferry Point Park upgraded. We worked our butts off for that. And now the image is going to be, oh, Ferry Point, oh, that's the one near the homeless shelter. Now, I personally have nothing against homeless people. In fact, I just gave them a nice expensive stroller and some books and some baby's clothes. But that's not the point. We already have, if we end up with this shelter, we do believe we can work with them. But that's not what we want. It's not what we want. We will be happy to do that, but that's not what we want. That's not what we requested in our neighborhood. That's not our opinion of what our neighborhood should be. You know, we care for them, we have empathy, and we will help. But that's not what we requested. This was dumped on us. Like a bully came by and just pushed us on the floor and took our cell phone. And that's the way we feel. We feel like we were dumped on and bullied. And like they say, we have more than our share. So why continue to downgrade an area that's trying to upgrade? And I'm not saying downgraded by the quality of the people. I'm talking about image.
Thank you.
We can speak on the street.
Good.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I want to keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes if you can. Anyone's got a comment, raise your hand. If I identify you, state who you are so we can get it for the record and we'll go from there. Good.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Ron Lieberman, and I'm an Executive Vice President for the Trump Organization and Donald Trump. And I'm here representing Trump Golf Links at Ferry Point, the newest, latest, greatest golf course that's going to hit New York City in less than 4 months. For 20 years, this community has suffered with a landfill dump over there. For 20 years. And it wasn't until we got involved about 2 years ago and forced this to the finish line to get this site done, built, and ready. It is now ready. And ladies and gentlemen, it is going to be the greatest thing that ever hit the Bronx. Beyond anyone's expectation in terms of economic impact, real estate values, all the good things that this borough president has been speaking about, all the economic activity that you want is about to start. That's why we're here to support the community, because we support this administration, we support what you guys do, and you have a hard job. Believe me, I don't want to be you guys. It is a tough job what you have to do. But to do it right next door, when we heard about it, when I was talking to Donald about it, we said, oh, that must be a mistake. Probably Homeless isn't talking to City Hall or Department of Parks because it's all disjointed. It doesn't make sense. How does it make sense to have the city invest all this money into this property to develop it, and then 5 minutes later put a homeless shelter there? And to your point about image, that's what we worry about. We worry about image, and we're going to be bringing great events there, great tournaments, and so just from our perspective, it doesn't seem logical. And then listening to what everybody has to say and some of the points that came out of your own mouth about it's not an ideal location. Wow. So even on top of that, it's not even an ideal location for like I don't know the first thing about what goes into an ideal location for a homeless center, but hearing from the same administration that's putting it there to say it's not ideal, on top of the fact that the same administration, the City of New York, has spent all this money, all your money, to help build this great golf course. Does that make sense to anybody?
No.
I know everybody's busy for time, but just on behalf of we're here to support this community. You now have a name and a face. This is Joe Rodica. He'll be more of a name and a face because he